Welcome to the holy day. This is the day that all comes true. Burn like a furnace. Recognize yourself for what you are.
Hey, how's it going? Good evening. It's Monday. I have very limited time, so let's rip this out. Matt Jones, Dark Path had another topic for us out here in YouTube land about favorite EPs. I have quite a few because I'm an EP nerd. And much like the live records topic, I felt like what a simple, great thing to talk about. It's probably well-worn territory in one way, shape, or form. I think there's probably been plenty of like VC videos about it or whatever. Specifically where it pertains to extreme metal, maybe not so much. I did keep this pile mostly to thrash and death metal. I could talk about hardcore punk on EP all day long. Also, newer releases I didn't really get into because there's so many good newer labels, especially tape labels like Caligari and the like, churning out tons of great EPs. So keeping this to, for lack of a better term, classic records, some stuff that was really, imprinted on me early on that I have a special sentimental attachment to, and some stuff that's just plain good, and I feel like I should mention it because I own it. In that vein, we're listening to the self-titled Entombed CD. This compiles all their early singles and EPs, Crawl, Stranger Aeons, Out of Hand, the split with the new Bomb Turks. There might be a comp song or two on here, something like that. Not remembering off the top of my head. But I own most of this stuff on vinyl. I've shown it off on several occasions, which is why I'm not pulling it out for this. But if you want to hear me talk about the Crawl EP, which is probably my favorite Entombed record, the one that has the guy from Nirvana 2002 singing, came out after Left Hand Path. That's on my 20 records that got me into death metal video. I also have some collection videos where I go through alphabetically that I'm very lazy about doing. I'll probably never get through. But when I hit the E's, I talk about all my Entombed stuff, so if you want to see me show off Entombed records, feel free to check that out. But, I like all their EP output just as much as Left Hand Path. I think it's a cool compilation to check out. And as far as I know, it's pretty cheap. I got it for $6 at Residency Records not that long ago. I also have the tape. Because why? Gotta have both. So yeah, gonna talk about some stuff I grew up with, some stuff I picked up over the years more recently, all important records in my opinion. Few things else that I chopped out, like I talked about In the Sign of Evil by Sodom. I instinctively always look up on the wall, like I don't remember the name of that. And there, I looked at the other one, and Apocalyptic Raids by Hellhammer. Those are the two that I have hanging up down here. I talked about them on my, I think it was the Stone Cold Black Metal Classics, if I remember right, that video. So I don't want to double dip too much, is all I'm saying. So welcome back to Ground Zero. We're going to talk about extended plays, which is a funny thing. EP, if you didn't know, means extended play records, I guess. All these archaic terms going back to when the record industry existed, I guess. Extended play, but long play. You'd think it'd be the other way around. I don't know. Singles technically being 2-song things. Extended play being 3 to 6. Somebody got on Wikipedia before he made this. Anyway, first EP up, something that was a classic from middle school for me. This is the Dead Embryonic Cells EP cassette. Came out in 90 or 91, I think. For me, back then, these things were priced accordingly, so this was probably $5 or $6. Dead Embryonic Cells being the big video on Headbangers Ball, being the big single from this, and what a song it is. Just a ripping, technically competent thrasher with gruff vocals. They also cover Orgasmatron, great, slow, plotting, foreboding song, Condemning War by one and only Motorhead. Very similar to the original. I'd heard the Sepultura version first, and I actually couldn't believe that the Motorhead version was so close, except for vocally. Apparently Lemmy didn't like Max Cavalera's vocals from what I read in some biography. But yeah, great little 3-songer. Troops of Doom, re-recorded version of Troops of Doom, Morbid Visions. Great. What can you say about Haunting the Chapel that hasn't been said dozens of times? Great Bridging the Gap record, a little thing to appease the masses between Show No Mercy and Hell Awaits. Very strong songwriting coming out of that sort of Judas Priest, Merciful Fate, at twice the speed with the ferocity of hardcore behind it. Deal from Show No Mercy and going into scarier, more epic territory with Hell Awaits. I feel like this is Show No Mercy a little truncated, a little bit more vicious, very fucking powerful songs. Chemical Warfare, of course, Captor of Sin. 2 songs that were in their live set for a long time. I mean, they made it all the way up to Decade of Aggression. I know they played 1 or 2 of those the one time I saw them. And, of course, the title track, Haunting the Chapel. Fucking great stuff. This Metal Blade Records, Restless Metal Blade. Not sure when it came. I think it was 84 this came out. But this is the original tape that I got back in, I think, 9th grade. Had this on tape back in the day. I picked this up in Boston 4 or 5 years ago at a place called Deep Thoughts in Jamaica Plain. It was pretty cheap, too. Not $5.98 cheap, but pretty cheap. Metallica, $5.98. EP, Garage Days Re-Revisited, covers record. Oh, man. So much good fun stuff. Jason New Kid's first record. Helpless, The Small Hours, The Wait, Crash Course in Brain Surgery, Last Caress and Green Hell. This always kind of bummed me out before I could get a hold of Misfits Collection 2, which wasn't to come out for years and years, because Last Caress, great song, wanted to hear the Misfits version of it, couldn't find it. You know, it was on that Beware record, I think, that never came out, and some single or a couple of singles. I actually ended up buying like a $25 bootleg CD that had like Rat Fink and a bunch of other Misfits stuff that had gone long out of print, just so I could have those songs pre-downloading times. But yeah, at any rate, Small Hours, Holocaust, The Wait, Killing Joke, my introduction to Killing Joke, probably a lot of people's introduction to Killing Joke. And again, other than a little bit more distortion, not all too different than the original, and it kind of shows you just how heavy Killing Joke is in a slightly different way than metal, you know, abrasive pre-industrial stuff coming out of Britain. And I can see how the bottom end of it and the percussive kind of heavy end of it might have been a slight influence on Metallica at some point. But yeah, Elektra Records, back in 87, because Master came out in 86. This old Elektra sleeve there. I actually think I mentioned this record a few updates back and said 86 instead of 87, so my anal retentive ass has to correct himself there. The closest thing to being a straight-up punk record in the pile. Great crossover record. 6 songs with Mike singing. COC, Corrosion of Conformity, originally from Raleigh, North Carolina. They lost their singer after their first record, Eye for an Eye, on this. Eric Ike, something like that. Went down to a power trio on this, and they really got very tight in a short period, year and a half, 2 years, something like that. Most of the tracks on this are re-recorded versions of stuff off of Eye for an Eye. The song Eye for an Eye. Not for me, What and Negative Outlook, I think, are all on there, but they're like night and day. As much as I like Eye for an Eye, it's kind of a sloppier, Black Flaggy sort of hardcore punk record. This goes into the territory of being almost like an Accused, where it's very, very tightened up and vacuum tight, but the bass is still doing its own thing. This very imaginative approach to not just taking ingredient A being punk and hardcore and ingredient B being thrash metal. There's elements of both, but they're kind of doing their own thing, and just by happenstance it falls within that territory. I feel like big Black Sabbath fans, I think somebody mentioned in an interview that they were big into like funk and like 70s psych and shit. Like they were well-rounded chaps. But yeah, this is, depending on the day, probably my favorite Corrosion of Conformity record. Animosity's no slouch either, and when I'm feeling like sloppy raw punk, it's definitely Eye for an Eye. But great record. Not 100% on the year. I think it was 85, I want to say. This came out. Came out before Animosity, which is 86. And this was 87. Nuclear Assault. The Plague came out after Game Over. There's an instrumental first track on here called Game Over. Good, like heavy, sort of epic, heavy metal tinged, like thrash metal song, very heavy stuff. There's the token jokey song, which a lot of thrash metal bands had, especially Nuclear Assault had pretty much one or two goofy songs per record. The whole pizza thrash era seemed to take that ball and run with it and write entire records around that. This one song in particular, Buttfuck, was about Vince Neil's car accident and the guy from Hanoi Rocks there. Really, you know, fast scattershot kind of vocals, that kind of thing, going into a weird blues breakdown on that, where John Connolly gives this little spoken word about he can put a blues song, a blues part in the middle of a thrash song because he's an artist and he can do what he wants. But the other serious tracks on this are a little bit going in a new direction for them. They had slower and heavier stuff on Game Over, but this had a little bit more, a heavier recording quality, a better guitar tone. A lot of people complain about the guitar tone on Game Over. I love it. Distortion's a little bit more. It's not quite as heavy as some of their contemporaries, I feel like, but you can hear the guitars better on it. Dan Lilker's bass and the drums on it are produced in such a way where the tom sound and the whatever effect is on the bass, it's very forceful. It's not distorted. It just sounds like a gunshot going off, and it's great. The Plague is kind of an epic song that's like just a few degrees of separation away from being almost like an epic doom song to me. If it was just a little bit slower, a little bit longer, very kind of epic heavy metal inspired, but John Connolly's vocals are like this weirdly charming but nasally kind of thing going on. Cross of Iron is great. That's more of a thrasher. Justice is definitely the most NYHC. Just the drum patterns, something kind of reminds me of Cro-Mags in it. Just that great 4 on the floor, heavy tom bust kind of thing. Kind of like certain Warzone songs, like it feels like they're going for that sort of thing rhythmically. So to back up Marty's kind of theory about how they had sort of a NYHC thing kind of very tastefully kind of woven in, I totally agree with that. But I can talk at length about Nuclear Assault all night, so I'm gonna cut myself off there. But Camo Center labels, band photos there, lyrics printed in her sleeve. Next up, this is a record that I really have only been familiarizing myself with maybe the past decade or so. It wasn't a high school favorite or anything. I only had 7 Churches back in the day, but The Eyes of Horror is a strong record. After the LP preceding it, I feel like it was a good farewell from the band till they returned recently. Only 5 songs, produced by Joe Satriani. 87 or 88, came out on Combat as well. So, Open the Gates, kind of, is a little bit more on the anemic and lifeless. I think that was a Carl Kennedy produced record. That was the dude from the Rods who produced a lot of Megaforce stuff, and he always was like kind of criticized for having a really thin, kind of limp sound, and that record's a glaring example of that. I think the music's pretty good. They're definitely doing more of a straight-up thrash thing, that sort of feral energy from 7 Churches, where they're really pushing the envelope, trying to play beyond their ability, that gives them this kind of like weird, from another dimension kind of vibe that I think helped spawn death metal. That's all gone on that record, but on this one, the production's better. The playing's a little bit, there's more energy. It is thrash, but it's very evil. Perhaps, Black and Thrash before it was Black and Thrash, or something like that, you could say. Or not. I don't know. It's definitely not straight up, fun times Bay Area thrash. It's very dark. Swing of the Axe and Storm of the Mind, side B on this, are two scary fucking songs, and they're fucking awesome. It was a great way for them to go out until the return of Possessed this year. So, and it is a Combat pressing. Let's see what kind of center labels. Play that game. Band shot there. Oh, yep, camo. Winter camo. I almost bought some winter camo Vans today, and I decided against it. Because, speaking of Max Cavalera, very few people can pull off winter camo. I don't think even he could, really. Next up, another thrash EP. The American Southwest's Sacred Reich, Surf Nicaragua. This is just iconic. I saw this everywhere when I was a kid. I bought it as an adult just because it was cheap, and I was like, I need to have the surfing nuclear guy on the coffin. Makes no sense. Just like, he's got a gas mask for a face, surfing on a coffin, holding a bomb. So, this is a 4-songer. A decent workmanlike cover of War Pigs that we don't really need. Although at the time, not everybody and their mother covered that song. Surf Nicaragua's a good thrasher. It's a little long. They do throw like a surf instrumental a la like, I don't know, like Pipeline or something like that. It's one of those kind of things. Just a riff for a little while in the middle of it. And, I don't know. I'm not, it actually kind of works for it. It's fine. The track on here that really does it for me, One Nation's a good song. It's a competent, above average, thrash metal song. Phil Ryan had pretty unique vocals for the time that I feel like, along with the Exhorter dude, like might have been an influence on Phil Anselmo. They're kind of, sort of baritone sung, like a little on the soulful side, but it's not really like a Danzig or Hetfield thing. They were kind of their own style. Draining You of Life, which was a song on their demo of the same name, is a crushing track, and it's worth the price of admission for this EP, in my opinion. I know that Ignorance has been re-released, and if I'm not mistaken, this is on it, this EP. But this is just a fun thing to have and throw on. The very of its time cover art, airbrushed. It's cool. Not even sure what year that was. I think it was 87, 88. Most of these are around that time. Mid-80s stuff, at least this first pile. Flag of Hate by Kreator. Came out after the first record, Endless Pain. The original version of this only had 3 songs. Flag of Hate, which is a song from Endless Pain, re-recorded much tighter. So crazy how, like, Endless Pain has its kind of proto-black, like, sloppy Teutonic thrash charm. But, it's one of those deals like the Sodom Live record where I talked about, where they do songs from the very first EP tightened up. Kind of the same kind of deal. It's like, how night and day is this? And it's only a year apart in recording when they were recorded. So the newer version of Flag of Hate, super good. A song called Take Their Lives and a song called Awakening of the Gods. Big strides in songwriting stuff. Way more kind of breathing riffs and wide open kind of song structures, and much more heavy, slowed down, but to kind of create more of a sense of power. Really good. And also, I guess they decided, just for the fuck of it, when this got released a few years later, re-released a few years later, they were gonna re-record 3 songs also from the first album, Endless Pain, Tormentor, and Total Death. And those versions also rip. So there's plenty to sink your teeth into there, to hear different versions of different songs. Very cool shit. Real quick, I'm just gonna mention Venom. Venom were a band that were from an era of like the new wave of British heavy metal stuff, where it was just between albums for tours and whatever, just crank out EPs. Mostly they were from different recording sessions. They didn't just take the versions of songs off of records. They did live records. This is one of the oldest records in my collection. Hell at Hammersmith 85. Witching Hour is side A. Teacher's Pet, Poison, and I think a Teacher's Pet Reprise are all on side B. As you may expect, very sloppy live recording. Fun listen. Came out on... did it come out on Neat? Yeah, it came out on Neat. I think Everything by Venom did in the beginning. The Warhead single. This is getting to be a pretty iconic record cover. I've seen like bootleg shirts of it and stuff floating around. Warhead, slow pounding classic. Lady Lust and the Seven Gates of Hell. Also on Neat. And we got Manitou, which this was a recent pickup of mine. One of my favorite, I mean, it's kind of a sleeper Venom track. It's from At War with Satan, you know, which is one long song on one side and I think 6 or 7 songs on the other that are, you know, kind of shorter. Something like that. Manitou is this great pounder of a song with a great catchy chorus. Manitou. And it's cool to have a single of it, or an EP rather of it. The songs on the flip, Women and Dead of the Night, I don't know if they appear on anything else. I don't think they do. So, that's a fun one. Venom's a lot of fun. I know some people hate fun. I think fun's cool. Amorphis, Privilege of Evil. So, posthumously released EP that was originally intended to be a split with this session from Incantation, which was released as Blasphemous Creation. So that was supposed to be a split album. I don't know. Relapse was going to put it out. I don't know if they decided like maybe the track lengths were too long and it might affect the audio quality, or maybe they just didn't like the recording. I don't know. But this came out after the Corellian Isthmus, and this was recorded in 91. Came out in 93 or 94. It's been re-released a bunch of times. This is a recent repress of it. Came out on white, this version. And yeah, it's Amorphis at their most gritty, just emerging from the ashes of abhorrence. 1 or 2 members anyway. And it's got that most in tune with like what was going on in Finland at the time. Kind of gaspy, croaky growls and these sort of repetitive, kind of spiraling, miserable kind of melodies over stuff. Very kind of gritty and epic, and you know, still 1 foot firmly in that swamp that Carcass and grindcore and early death metal came out of, but you could sort of hear where they might be going with like more epic stuff. The songs are pretty accomplished pieces all on their own, and it's great. Then you've got Blasphemous Cremation. Mostly all tracks except for one that are shared with Onward to Golgotha, with very different production. A lot more stripped down, straightforward kind of production to it. Feels like a very good demo, or, you know, an EP recording, which is what it is. So sometimes I prefer the versions on this record. I think the versions on this, it's like you can hear everything that's going on a little bit better, and I get that part of the charm and appeal of Onward to Golgotha and a lot of Incantation's material is this sort of reverb cave kind of thing. This still has a fair amount of that, but I do like it a little bit more straightforward. Sometimes it's what I'm in the mood for, so I'll pull for this one. This came out on Necroharmonic some years ago. Goat Center labels, black vinyl. Alright, I have to run and do something real quick. This was actually the one that I originally thought of when I was brainstorming stuff to pull off the shelves. I grabbed Blasphemous Creation just because I was like, oh yeah, it was a split with that Amorphis record that I pulled. The debut EP by Incantation, Entombed of Evil. They'd only been a band for like a year when they recorded this, and most of the songs end up on Onward to Golgotha as well. There's one track that, I'm trying to remember the name of it, one track that ends up only on, re-recorded on Blasphemous Creation, and that song is Eternal Torture. Will Romer sang on this as just kind of a, not as a permanent member, but just from Mortician, just as a favor to John McEntee and those guys. Some of the stuff was written with Paul Ledney, I think, Profanatica, but it's very raw, bare bones versions of all those greats, you know, that ended up on Onward. Entrapment, Unholy Massacre, Devoured Death, Profanation, songs that would, you know, be in their live set for years to come. You've got the Twisted Swirling, the OGs of Twisted Swirling, labyrinthine, scary fucking death metal right there, and this is a very raw dog version of it, and it's fucking great. This came out a few years ago on Hell's Headbangers. It came with a nice poster, and I will show off the screen printed side. The goat, little ibex for you. And also, on Hells. Was this Hell? No, sorry. They signed to Hells after this. This came out on Nuclear War Now. The Midnight 10-inch, Farewell to Hell. This is my favorite Midnight record. This is Midnight at their most ass-kicking, in my opinion. Came out before Satanic Royalty. I don't think they have any overproduced albums or anything slick. But this is just the end of their real raw, like, just kind of raw feral era where they were just doing all singles and stuff like that. Speaking of a big EP band, Midnight, I mean, The Complete and Total Hell has this on it, I believe. And they have so many good singles that they're just a fun band to throw on a song, 2 songs, that kind of thing. Tightened up Venom Worship. Venom, if they could play better. You know the story. That's this first song, Black Rock and Roll. Such a sing-along chorus classic. I'm also a very big fan of Vomit Queens. Give It to Me, My Vomit Queens. It's Bursting Out, My Vomit Queens. Maybe Queens singular. It's been a while since I've listened to this. Let's see, did I get it right? It's Bursting Out, Vomit Queen, singular. Hang My Head in Shame. Anyway, fucking great record. Last up, this was originally a 7-inch. This was re-released by Relapse with some bonus tracks, 3 bonus tracks. So I guess technically this can't be considered an EP, but it's so damn short. The original version is an EP, so fuck it. General Surgery's Necrology. Carcass Worship. One of the first Carcass Worship bands, members of Dismember and Carnage. Same dudes. Out of Sweden. Great stuff. I feel like a lot of Carcass stuff, Carcass worshipping stuff, kind of comes off as, you know, Reek of Putrefaction being played backwards. You know, the riffs stolen and played slightly differently, changed a little bit. This is kind of more of a band kind of trying to do their own take on Carcass. You know, you can't help but think there's a little bit of Sweden getting in there, guitar tone wise, and, you know, with some other nuances, but all in all, it's just great, you know, Reek of Putrefaction loving stuff from some Swedish guys. They did more after this. I have another singles compilation with all the stuff when they reformed, and it's also pretty damn good, but this takes the cake. The original article there, originally a 7-inch on Relapse, now a 10-inch with bonus tracks on Relapse. So that is my EP video. Those are my EPs. Kind of rushed through this. Sorry if I was a little mush-mouthed, but I got to get going. I got work to do. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.